this started? All right, so if I could have everyone back downstairs, we are going to start our brand panel. While we're all getting seated, I'm going to introduce the folks. We've been through this a couple of times. You know how it goes. I say a little ditty, music plays, blah, blah, blah. All right, so I'm excited to introduce our brand panelists. I'm going to start by introducing our moderator. That is going to be Cooper Monroe. Cooper is the CEO of the Motherhood, which is a local influencer marketing agency. But Cooper has more than 30 years of experience working with some of the world's biggest brands and agencies to craft successful marketing messages. Next, we have Sahidat Abdul. Sahidat is a global influencer marketing lead. She has experience working with some of the world's biggest companies, including Google, Airbnb, and Depop. And she really finds success in creating authentic stories that connect with consumers. Next, we have Lexi Christie. Lexi is the Senior Director of Brand Marketing for Chobani. And Lexi has more than 7 years of experience with Chobani. She started as a social media strategist, and now she is in charge of their entire brand. Finally, we have Meredith Good. Meredith Good is the Senior Manager of Influencer Strategy for Dick's Sporting Goods. And little hint, Dick's Sporting Goods has some very exciting things coming up with influencer strategy that I'm excited to hear about. So, put your hands together for our brand panelists. Thank you very much.
Sweet dreams are made of the
Well, hi everybody, and Sarah and Alex and team, thank you, because you've created an environment and an opportunity to have a conversation that clearly we really need to have. There were some wonderful things that came up today. Amazing job today. Amazing job with your panel, you guys. But there were some things that really were clear that we need to have this conversation. We need to be talking to each other. And for us, influencer marketing and content creation is the heart of any kind of social strategy. It's kind of it's the kitchen table. It's where the conversations happen, where the community is built, where the trust is built, where the relationships are built, where you can test things out, where you can get to know each other. It's the source and the heart of a social strategy. So what happens at that table where we all are collectively around today? What happens there is that we talk to each other. We ask each other questions. We get to know each other better. We get to know each other's processes better. We get to know what's on each other's minds and where the gaps are and where the really good things are. So that's the goal. We all three talked, and what the goal we really want for today is to share from a brand perspective some of the things that we wish that the creator world knew, but also to hear from all of you the questions that you have. Clearly there are many. So let's start the conversation and ask the three of you to you're devoting your life to this. This is what you do every day. And it's a lot. You're major brands. And why? Why do you do this? Why does it matter to you? What do you love about it? And what drew you to this life's work?
Hi everyone, I'm Meredith and work for Dick's Sporting Goods. Something that I really love about being in the creator space is that I think we're truly seeing creators transform the way that brands think about their marketing campaigns. And we're seeing creators and the content that they're producing really is the center of some of the largest campaigns across major retailers. I think we're seeing creators and brands really come up with new ways to leverage creators as an extension of their internal team. I think we're going to continue to see growth and evolution, and I'm just really excited to continue to be a part of the space.
Hi everyone, I'm Lexi. Alex made my job sound very big, but I'm very honored to be here and represent Chobani. So influencer marketing and creator are a pillar of the things that I oversee on a day-to-day basis. And similar to Meredith, I love this space because it brings that extra authenticity to the brand. Chobani is a very authentic brand. You might be sitting here thinking, oh, she works for that Greek yogurt company, but we do so much more. We also make creamer and oat milk, and we are owned and led by a founder. So we actually do kind of have a face to our brand. but not many people know that. And maybe sometimes we need to do a better job of telling that story. But by partnering with creators and influencers, it allows us to really extend that authenticity. Sorry, everyone, clearly having mic issues over here. We're better now. So yeah, extending that authenticity for the brand.
Well, those are amazing answers. And just to piggyback off of that, I honestly fell into influencer marketing. I just was like chronically on social, and one of my friends, she worked for a magazine company, and she got to go to Art Basel Fashion Week, and I was just like, if your company's ever hiring, please tell them I'm interested. I'll get them coffee, I'll like run errands. And one day she calls me and is like, yeah, my company's hiring, and the next day I start work and it's BeautyCon, and I just fell in love with the industry ever since then, because I saw how authentic the influencers were showing up within those spaces and the brands that were partnering with them, and then the communities that they were building online and offline coming together. It was just like sensory overload for me, and I was just thrilled to be a part of this industry. So fast forward, it's been about 8 years in this space for me, and I've seen like the woodworks, the gauntlet of everything from managing influencers to like working with major brands, and now I'm an independent consultant and helping brands scale up their influencer partnerships, and even with some of their celebrity relationships as well, and finding ways to continue to make sure that the creators' voices are heard within these rooms, but also advocating for the brands in a way that's mutually beneficial. So bringing all of my knowledge and expertise to the table so that we can really make this industry a better place, because it's really a people-led business, and just finding ways for us to really like humanize at the end of the day. There's a lot of numbers that get thrown around, but at the end of the day, it's me and behind the scenes, and I'm the brand. Lexi's the brand. Meredith's the brand. Like, we're all the brand, but yeah, relationships are very important. And if it wasn't for that friend, I wouldn't be here today. So, yeah.
It was so clear in your panel, the creator panel, that talking about it is a human endeavor. These are people, individual people creating content and then working with brands and trying to meet in the middle. So you're expressing how much goes in on your, hoping that the brands understood what goes in to developing these pieces of content. The amount of research and time and love and effort and energy that you devote is really important to share. And it's also important to share the time and the effort and the layers and the unbelievable amount of, perhaps it's regulatory or legal, or in the development of a single influencer campaign. There's a lot that goes on. So for us to be able to share that, and you to be able to share what's on your side, is a way to meet in the middle and understand each other better. So, soup to nuts. Each of you share. What happens when you know that you're going to be activating an influencer campaign? Let's start at the beginning and then go through the process.
For sure. In the process, there's a larger team at hand, and influencer sits within certain teams. It's not usually just a standalone. At times, we may be planning a year in advance, a quarter in advance, even a month in advance, but more times than not, it's a year and a quarter in advance. So there's a lot of conversations that go on between teams, depending on the scale of the business. There may be consultants that are coming in to do research and understanding like consumer segments, and dissecting that information and sharing with us. This may be a larger opportunity for the brand to start tapping into. And that is just going to be an addition to what we call business as usual. So BAU work in terms of like how the brand is showing up consistently on social. So when you see the larger campaigns, just know that there's a marketing team, there's a PR team, there's a whole 360 approach that's going behind that. And leadership is pretty much looking at the previous year's numbers and figuring out how can we either scale up or scale down on that, what was successful, what was not, and then we can go into figuring out like what's going to be the messaging behind that with a larger team effort. And then the selection process from the influencers really goes into understanding like how is this message going to come across, who have been some of our amazing advocates and what relationships can we really tap into, and what new relationships are we going to go into from there. And then it's an approval process. Sometimes there are panels that we have internally that will determine which influencers will be sponsored or not. And all of this is to talk about like sponsored posts. Like gifting is a bit more of a simpler process, but for sponsorship, there's a lot of discussions that go on. Sometimes we're planning for like 2 months and having internal discussions to then determine like who are we actually going to approach. And then we go into the conversation, and then we go into negotiation. So what you may see on social was probably 3 months leading up to that.
So we work with influencers and creators in a handful of different ways. One is from a campaign perspective. One is through our shopper marketing team, or omni-channel marketing team. So if we want you to purchase more product at Walmart, we're going to work with an influencer who is buying product from Walmart. There's a very clear ROI to that campaign and how that performance should perform. And then the third piece is working with creators as an extension of our brand to develop content for our owned and operated feeds. So very different processes across all of them. But if I think about the highest level with our total marketing calendar, I'm looking at full year. What are our product priorities? What are our brand priorities? Who is the audience that we're going after? What is the spend? What tactics do we want to leverage? And then starting to think about our influencer plans across those different campaigns, because those are the campaigns that have dollars associated with them. So you might be obsessed with, let's just say, a Chobani complete product, which is our highest protein yogurt, but actually this year we're focused on Chobani creamer and Chobani with 0 sugar, and that's where I have the dollars to spend. So we align on that first, and then we go into our process of, are we going to manage this in-house? Do we have the bandwidth to do that? Obviously preferred, because then we get to have that direct relationship, like Takshi's, hope I said that right, was talking about earlier, but also because we are a lean team, sometimes we have to work with agencies too. And so the agencies would be briefing on behalf of Chobani and going back and forth with those discussions for us. So after we've aligned on that plan, we are either briefing direct or briefing the agency. And we do have a very clear brief, and I would say clear brief in terms of some of the expectations of what are the key talking points that we need you to say or have to say based off of just legal, which I might be probed for a question later on that, and I will dive a little bit deeper, but we want to make it clear up front of what the expectation is. We are reaching out to you, to influencers, to creators, to put your spin on it, to tap into a particular series that you might have. We want it to be in your voice, but there are still certain things that you have to say. It's Chobani 0 sugar Greek yogurt. It's not Chobani 0. So, you know, there are certain things that we have to be very specific about. And we do ask for scripts to read through them first so that we eliminate that back and forth later after you film. So that review process is not annoying for the creator or influencer as well. Once we go through that review process, which includes either some of the marketing team or some of our legal team, depending on exactly what the ask looks like, then we go into go live and measurement. So that's a speed round of that answer.
That was great. And much of what these two already discussed is quite similar to our campaign process as well. So at the highest level, many of our priorities and requests stem from the overarching brand goals and seasonality. So we can just use back to school as a good example for Dick's Sporting Goods. So that's really where it starts. Once we understand the brand goal, we then determine the types of talent that would be a perfect fit for the campaign. We produce the campaign brief. We do partner with an agency on almost all of our campaigns, just because we have so many running at the same time. From there, the agency would source the talent. We would then review and approve the talent. We would review concepts that are provided by the influencers. From there, they would submit their content. It would again go through reviews. And I do just want to pause there, especially with a large-scale corporation, there are many layers of approvals. So while I am quite jealous of the quick turnaround time to review talent and content, it can take some time for a big corporation, all the way up through leadership needing to review this content. So sometimes, as much as the influencer team would like to just give a quick approval, we do have to report into many other teams within the organization. And then from there, once the content's approved, it goes live, and then we obviously just pay close attention to the reporting and ensure that the content is delivering on the goals of the campaign.
So can you talk briefly about how the influencer piece fits into your overarching and how that works as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way it works is essentially it is just one piece of the puzzle in terms of the marketing mix. So if you do have a big campaign, I'll use back to school again, we would have online video, television, influencer would be a portion of the campaign and the campaign dollars. We are often provided a budget to manage for the campaign. But one thing I wanted to note, and I think is super exciting, is that, like I had mentioned at the beginning, we're seeing that creators are really becoming a part of all of the different marketing touch points. So we're leveraging our creators as models in photo shoots. We're leveraging them as part of TV shoots. So I think we'll continue to see more and more of that throughout the coming years as well, which is great.
Someone talked about behind the scenes earlier, I think it was you, and you're doing the same.
Absolutely, yes. Lots of leveraging our talent to capture some cool behind-the-scenes sneak peeks of some of the upcoming campaigns.
And do you want to talk a little bit how you fit into how influencer fits into overarching?
It's very similar,
Yeah.
almost to a T. I guess the other difference would be that last point that I mentioned about how we look at creators as kind of that extension of the brand to create content for our O&O channels. And we do have those direct relationships. Those are the folks that we are texting and approving things pretty quickly because it's a lot more quick turn, even though it is showing up on an Instagram or a TikTok. But from a campaign perspective, it's pretty much the exact same.
So of this process, are there some key things that you wish when you're doing this, like, oh, I wish the influencers, the creators understood this more or understood it better? Are there things that stick out to you that you have the opportunity to share?
I can jump in with my legal comments. We always joke internally about putting our legal hat on. Well, the first thing is read the brief and read your contract so that you know exactly what you are agreeing to. I think that's really important because to answer potentially your question from earlier, if you don't feel like the content that you were creating aligns with the original brief or the original ask or the approved script, you need to look at that termination clause and what that entails. And in some cases, hopefully the brand will do the right thing and pay the creator or influencer for their time if they decide that they're not going to go live. That's usually our stance. But in terms of legal, there was lots of jealousy between Meredith and I listening to you because I would love to write a brief that's 3 sentences long and gives total freedom to the influencer or creator, but we work for multi-billion dollar companies, not saying Duolingo is not, but there's a lot more scrutiny. And there's a lot of, the FTC is watching what we are doing. And so we do have to be pretty clear. So when we say no third-party brands or no third-party IP, what we mean is don't wear that Pittsburgh Pirates hat. Don't wear that aloe sweatshirt. Be very careful if you're filming in your home and you have a beautiful print on the back of your wall because that belongs to the artist. And there are so many other things. That the music that you choose, if you're in your car and decide to film in your car and you show the radio what song is on there, Chobani has to enter a contract and agreement with each of those brands to allow you to be able to show it. There are some brands that don't care about that legal risk. Chobani is one that does care about it. So that's my kind of big call out and watch out is understand the risk that the brand is willing to take on, but that doesn't mean we still don't have fun with our creators and influencers and the content that gets developed. We just like to have more of those checks and balances before we get to that filming process so that it doesn't become a horrible experience for both sides.
And to piggyback off of that, I would also say that look at the relationship that you're ultimately building at the end of the day. Don't treat things as transactional. It's very important to understand what the wider purpose of that relationship is. Like we were speaking earlier, like there's a lot more that goes behind the process of approaching an influencer. There's probably like several team members that said yes, and I may have fought for you in that process and said like absolutely yes, and 3 other people may have said no. And to get to that point where I'm reaching out and saying like this is an opportunity, try to honor that and see like the ways that we could work together, but still honor yourself and understand that you as well as a business have to reach certain goals. But if there's a way that we could meet in the middle, always look for that way. And just to illustrate that, I had an opportunity with a creator where there was third-party IP involved. Unfortunately, I was on vacation and the content got approved, it went up, and unfortunately it had to get taken down that same day. The creator was not happy with it, of course, like within reason. And it was one piece within a carousel that really just needed to like go away. I don't think Instagram had the feature where you could just delete that one picture from the carousel at that time. And they were livid. They did not want to take it down. They're asking for like a reshoot fee, all these things, because it was seen by a lot of their audience and they have a pretty like popular following. So I had to get on a call with them and tell them like, look, there are larger conversations being had behind the scenes. I know that this is not the best way for us to really begin our relationship, but if we start like this now, to be quite frankly, honest with you, you're going to be blacklisted. And that happens a lot of times. If someone is difficult, if someone is not really easy to like get along with or communicate things to, which could kind of be like subjective as well, but just know we're in a people business and you have to kind of play ball and understand what the relationships look like, the front of the scenes and behind the scenes as well. So know that how you're showing up is important, and if you're being transactional, then we could just say, okay, you know what, no worries, but that entire team or the entire like marketing department will know about that situation and say, we don't want to work with that person anymore. And people talk and they tell their friends that may be at other companies, and you know, word just gets around. So just be really mindful of how you're building relationships and don't treat it transactionally. Thankfully, we were able to come to like a middle ground, and I explained everything to her. I like to be really real in my conversations with people because like, this is life. Like we're here together and we can really grow together. And I think it's really important to like look out for one another. So ultimately that creator was able to take the loss on the $1,000 that they were asking for, and in 4 months they got $50,000 from the brand. So if they didn't listen, then they would have lost out on all of that money. So yeah.
Just a couple things from my end. Thank you for touching on the legal piece, so I don't have to. But I think three key things to keep in mind. One, make sure you very clearly understand the goal of the campaign and the goal of your content. And if you're confused, don't hesitate to reach out to the brand for clarification. To keep in mind brand safety, I'm sure that everyone does, but I think that that's just super important. So make sure you understand kind of the brand personality, what they would and wouldn't do. I'm sure there's probably a list of do's and do nots, so make sure you're paying close attention to that. And 3, always feel empowered if you do receive some feedback that you, sorry. A little too quiet. Always feel empowered if you receive some feedback that you don't agree with, or you are concerned that the feedback won't perform well on your channel, to push back, to ask questions, to have a conversation with the brand. Because most often the brands are willing to meet in the middle, and we of course want your content to perform. So always happy to have that honest conversation and make sure that we all feel good about the content you're producing.
Do you guys want to have a word on budgets? I know that there was a lot of talk about rates, and it sounds like budgets are baked in and they're not budging. So is there anything that you'd want to talk about on that front?
I'd say that from a budget perspective, when you hear a big name brand, you automatically assume that there is a large budget associated with them, which might not be the case. And my example before of you might be obsessed with one product, but we're actually not supporting that product in a large enough way this year from a, you know, just a larger marketing standpoint. But what I think is something that I thought your panel was really helpful today to put into perspective around just the total time. Not that we aren't aware of that, but just to think through, okay, from that first touch point to all of the steps that it takes to get to that end point, and even going through the rounds of feedback. It's a good perspective. However, it is very confusing for brands when rates are so all over the place and could be $10,000 for one person and $100,000 for another. And so when we do have limited budgets and we have to make choices, probably going to go with the $10,000 person just because of we maybe want quantity for folks that are supporting the brand for a specific initiative. So it is really hard to measure because it's not like your typical media plan where there are CPMs assigned to things and you know what the average CPM should be, so you know if you're getting a good deal. You don't really know. And so I think there's, I'm going off a little bit here, but there is a good aspect of testing and learning. Don't be afraid to do a one-off with a brand, and for us too, we aren't afraid to just start with, hey, let's do one thing together so that we see how this performs, we can learn from it, we can optimize, and then think about what a long-term partnership could look like.
And on top of budgets, we kind of use a calculator to predetermine what the ROI is going to be for that creator. So whenever you're sharing your metrics, it could be whatever number of clicks you got, the amount of accounts you reached, that is inputted into a calculator that sometimes like data science teams have created this based off of like historical data to understand like, okay, if we are going to sponsor this creator, this is the earned media value that we're going to get from this. And that is where we're trying to like have a delicate dance between the numbers of ROI and like how much we invest into this creator and like how can we maintain the integrity of the brand at the end of the day. So sometimes whenever you do have like your rates and a brand comes back and says like this is what we have, it's because that number is also being like tracked by leadership, and leadership will come to us and say, why did you spend outside of budget? Why did you go over like the estimated EMV value that we're going to get? So I feel like we're getting really down with these numbers here. I want to pick up the energy again and just remind you that like there are people still on the other end fighting for like more budgets like ourselves that are really humanizing those numbers and sharing like, look, this person has like really tapped into this community, and the more data that you give us, the easier it is for us to like really like fight for that in leadership. So I think we also touched on it a bit when, where do you stop doing the gifted stuff and go into like the paid stuff? It's nice to share like, oh, you've posted this organically and your audience has clicked this link 100 times, or you have those LTK stats to back it up, and then I can take that to my leadership team and say like, this person's going to be worth the investment. This person is someone that we should invest in the long run because they're already organic advocate and their audience just needs that extra nudge and push to like go to the next like product that we're like launching and really like look into what we're doing some more. So don't get bogged down by the numbers. Not all companies use EMB and all those things, but if you know you're working with something like that, don't be offended that the budget is the budget. And
Perspective of what brands are thinking about, because at the end of the day, we do in most cases have to tell our president or our CMO how things are performing and what, would we do this over again? And so we have to internally make that case, whether it is EMV or something else. it's still important to a lot of leadership. And I know for Chobani, we're not direct to consumer. So it's much harder for me to prove an ROI. I need to get other people to just believe that we should be investing and having those authentic conversations.
That's great. They've pretty much hit on everything I'd want to touch on. I just think that when we're debating, let's say, between two talent that could be a great fit for a campaign, we certainly do look at organic mentions. I think that's really important. It doesn't have to be your whole feed, but is this creator featuring our brand organically? Are they featuring the products that we carry in our stores? And if that creator, maybe it is a bit more costly to engage them versus the other that we were debating, we still would consider going with the higher price point and that creator just because they feel like the best fit for the campaign. So always great to show organic examples when you're engaging with the brand.
I love how you pointed out too that you all are advocates internally and champions and cheerleaders and fighting for the influencers and the creators they want on the team. So you do have people internally that are fighting the good fight and trying to make it work. And that's awesome to hear because the best partnerships happen that way. So on that note, let's talk about the successes. So successful campaigns, if you want to get into specifics or examples, but also what are the elements of your best performing campaigns? And specifically, like what are they? Like what makes a great campaign? And how do you define success?
Take that first. I'll use an example of a holiday 2023 campaign, and we actually went a little bit of the Duolingo route for this one, where we didn't create quite a detailed brief. It was pretty high level and just asked creators to really showcase Dick's Sporting Goods as the destination for holiday gifting. So that was kind of the ask. We did give a few talking points, not very many, and had creators come back with their specific concepts of how they would bring that to life. So I think the creative freedom was huge. We really encouraged our creators to entertain first and then kind of go in with the educational piece. And we just encouraged them to create content that performed best on their channel. And overall, we saw a number of the videos go viral organically just because we allowed them to really produce those assets that worked for their channel.
I think working for your channel, I mean, that's clearly the theme of today. What is authentic to you is key. Our first viral video through a creator on TikTok was with this woman who unfortunately passed away earlier this year, but her handle was Cooking with Linja, if you have heard of her. Lynn, she is this awesome creator that makes recipes, but she did it in her own style. And so that was why it was so successful. We just wanted to create awareness of using Greek yogurt in a recipe, and that one didn't have the ROI, the business aspect to it. It was just awareness, eyeballs, impressions. So that was one. I'll give another example, but it really depends on the objective of the brief and how you define success for each individual initiative. But another example, just because I think this one is fun and different, is that when we launched Chobani Complete, I'm on a big Chobani Complete thing today, highest protein product that Chobani offers, 20 grams of protein. I was doing kind of a partnership analysis, trying to find the white space. Who could we partner with to reach that niche audience that maybe wasn't as easy for us to reach on our own? And I found this white space with fitness instructors. At the time, most brands were partnering with fitness influencers, athletes, but there was kind of this untapped space with fitness instructors. And we knew that Cody Rigsby, you probably know him from Peloton, Cody Rigsby was a huge Chobani fan, and so we said, let's just start seeing what kind of posts he could create and talk about Chobani Complete. And his Boo Crew, he has a very loyal, dedicated following, was all over it because they wanted to hear what he was consuming, what he was eating, what he was trying. And in this case, it was all about sentiment. And the comments, they were so good that we were like, all right, let's try something new. Let's put his face on one of our products and see if it sells even better in store than it's selling now. And so we did it. That was kind of just a let's get together and do something that's very unique. And it was the an existing SKU, so not a new flavor. We reskinned the packaging to be XOXO Cody focused, and that particular flavor saw a lift in base velocity, the things that we care about from a sales perspective. So it did extremely well, and it lifted total Chobani Complete business. So huge success story that turned into a year-long partnership. I should also mention, we got very lucky that that product hit shelves right when Cody Rigsby was on Dancing with the Stars. So the stars aligned for Chobani in that moment, but it started with like just an Instagram post and turned into this long-term deal and is based on our product at shelf.
I would say that when research is done properly on the influencers that we're partnering with and figuring out like who can really organically tell these stories, it's been the best process. And it's not easy because it's just like one person, like looking through like 200 influencers and trying to figure out who's the best person to work with. So that's where I usually lean into like manager relationships and have those conversations and say like, who loves Chobani, for instance, on your roster, and like have they posted it? Like having those conversations has really helped me tap into those influencers more, so that when I do bring it back to leadership and when they do come back with the creative concepts, it really shines through who is an authentic like advocate for the brand on their own, and they probably already had their own ideas on how to integrate the product into like a sponsors post, a dedicated post on like their own feed for their community. And I found the most success in the space of like doing the delicate dance between the numbers and that like qualitative and quantitative portion of things. But all in all, I would just say like there's only so much information you could get from like following someone on a week on social, that you do need insider help in that information research from a manager to kind of help like broaden the picture a bit more.
So good. Okay, so we heard from the creator panel that they don't get feedback at the end of a campaign oftentimes. So the impact of their, what the brand saw on the brand side, and what the results were. So could you all talk about metrics, ROI, what you're measuring, what you need from creators in order to effectively report back, and what you're looking for from a measurement and metric standpoint?
Yeah, I can go first. So we do still look at all of your standard KPIs. So organic impressions is huge for us, engagement rate. Something else that we pay close attention to is just the sentiment on a post and ensuring that it really ties back to the actual sponsored content. So if you're promoting a sneaker and everyone's talking about your lip color, not ideal. Definitely want to make sure it ties back to what you're paying the creator to do. Also pay attention to things like swipe ups and clicks. That is still important to a retailer. But I think anytime that you as a creator are able to just share proactively some of the results that you're seeing, screenshot some of the comments, and if you're getting some great DMs, feel free to pass those along, just because that's really great insight for our brand as well. But interesting, we as a brand don't necessarily share enough results back with the creators, so that's definitely something that I'll take back. It's a good learning for me.
I would say we're very similar in terms of what we're looking for. Again, it's harder for Chobani to have a true ROI unless we are running these programs with a particular retailer that has a click-through. So we are looking mostly at impressions, and that's when it is helpful to have some paid support behind the content. We also do like working with influencer agencies for larger campaigns because they're able to provide brand lift studies or sales lift studies sometimes, which is just a helpful selling point for us internally. So I think those are definitely the big ones on our side.
And I would say, based off of the data, sometimes like, just to plainly put it, capitalism, honestly. I've had situations where a creator has like sold $40,000 off of one story, $40,000 in product off of one story, and we paid them like $5,000. Unfortunately, like my boss, leadership, the powers that be, they're not going to tell me like, oh, let's pay them $20,000 next time. They're going to tell me, lock that person in for a 3, 4, 6 month contract, and let's make sure that we have like this steady stream of, you know, numbers going, which ultimately is great for the creator as well, because now you have like a long-term partnership. But it's hard to say like, oh, you know, you made $40,000 for this brand off of one story post. I can't tell you that. I can't say that. Like, I literally would get fired if I did. So having that delicate dance with like the society we live in with capitalism is kind of important. So it all comes down to you understanding how to like value your time and put that number out there, and also do your own due diligence with being a LTK promoter, being an Amazon promoter, and seeing what your numbers are to be able to stand firmly in the rate that you ask for. So I think that is where we have that like meeting in the middle, if you will, to figure out where the relationship could grow.
And maybe if you're able to pull some of that data, or you're seeing sentiment on your post outperform sentiment on another post, that kind of opens the door for you to say, this is performing really well for me. Maybe we can take this partnership up a level. I can't promise that every single brand is going to go the Cody Rigsby route with you, but it might open the door for a longer term partnership, or for a partnership that's outside of just social.
And I guess that leads to a question about getting in the door. And you raised some great points on our conversation earlier when we were getting ready for this about social proof. And sometimes a no doesn't mean a complete no. It just means you're on a list, and it's, you know, maybe down the road. So could you guys just talk about really quickly before we get into Q&A, how those relationships could be started from somebody who wants to work with you?
Sure. I think it's important to reach out. I think that outreach, although it is long and tedious, it is something that gets through sometimes. I may have like 100 emails, but that may be the one I read that day that stuck out to me, and it showed that this is someone that I should have on the radar. And you may not, sometimes if you like email like the alias account, it may go to like an entire team, but we do usually keep like a running list of the people who reach out and try to keep track of them, especially when you're working in a large company. There's just so much to do in so little time that we pass these lists along to our agencies to help us continue to track. And there's different tools as well. So your name with like, if you're ever adding the accounts, maybe pulled into like our monthly report and shows like, okay, these are the creators that reached out. These are the people who have organically mentioned us. Let's continue to keep them in mind, and then monitor like what was said on social, so that then we can like build that relationship organically through the future. But we may never sell your page until like you actually reached out, because imagine like the brand is also dealing with customer service things at the end of the day too. So between customer service, influencers, and your mom who just wants to tag like her favorite brands like 10 times over in a day, and like, you know, it's hard for us to see everything. So outreach is very important, and coming with like the value of, you know, love your brand, here's why, XYZ, and sentiment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And unfortunately, I receive probably 10 to 20 emails a day with just outreach, looking to partner. So it is unfortunately pretty difficult to respond to everyone, though I always read the email and I always send it along to our agency to add to a roster. And I think, again, we kind of touched on this, but things that make you stand out, sending organic posts featuring the product. If it's a retailer that features a lot of brands, calling out the brand or the category that you love the most is great, because I'll always include that in my note to the agency of, hey, this person would be fabulous for a golf campaign. Let's keep them in mind. So I think any ways that you can just, you know, highlight your metrics, content that you've created in the past is always helpful for us, and we'll keep you top of mind for any future campaigns.
All right, questions?
Hi, thank you. So I am a personal trainer. I'm in the health and wellness space, And I have a smaller account, like 16,000. So what would you guys say from these huge brands? I used to work at Dick's headquarters, so I want to talk with you after. But what would you say with smaller brands like myself? What things can we do to start growing, to start getting the bigger brands' attention?
Speak to the agencies. They're the ones who would typically work with the smaller creators. And so like brand side, we would focus more on like the larger relationships, celebrity partnerships to get the faces on the Greek yogurts and things like that. So at times there's just a lot going on at once that it's not lost on the agencies to kind of start growing these relationships, because you can be at 16K today and you can be at 160K or 1.6 million by the end of the year. You know, you never know. So it's never a process where it's like you cannot work with the brand. You absolutely can work with the brand, but there's just like certain structures in place to ensure that like we're putting our time towards the things that our leadership teams want us to focus on.
But I also wouldn't count yourself out. We have run campaigns where we're partnering with influencers that have 10K followers. It's based on engagement, quality content, but don't be surprised if you do receive an email back from a brand that says maybe we're not focusing on that specific genre right now, or we don't have a campaign going, but we'd love to send you product. It might start there. But I wouldn't count yourself out, because even some of the big brands are partnering with influencers that aren't Cody Rigsby and celebrities too.
And I just wanted to also add to that, sorry, because I want to like share like more clarity on that. I used to be the director of influencer marketing for the agency on record for Google Pixel, and they have a influencer like advocacy program where we welcome 600 creators, more so micro influencers, into the program once a year. And within that, you may think like, oh, they're just gifting me like this one time, but they only work with influencers within that program for paid partnerships for the year. So take those gifting opportunities to be a part of those advocacy programs, because that's where like the paid work may come through. But the agency that I worked at was the one that was managing that. So when I gave you that advice of like work with the agency, it's coming from that space of knowing that all the micro influencer relationships were managed directly through us, and we made those recommendations. We made sure that they're actively engaged, and that's how we were able to like help them grow their relationships on behalf of Google.
Thank you.
Okay, so coming from a brand POV, I'm curious to know if you guys have done like experiences for influencers and how you measure the ROI on that, and like any insight on the kind of swag boxes or anything you send to your like long-term influencer partners.
Unfortunately, I haven't done any sort of experience or experiential yet. I started about a year and a half ago. I think pre-COVID, there was a ton of these really exciting events happening, and hoping to bring them back. I have some really cool ideas, so we'll see, more to come. In terms of gifting and boxes, we have really decreased in terms of the extravagant boxes and all of the essentially waste that these creators don't need, and just really send them the latest launches. We'll also engage with them and ask, what do you want out of these products? Pick your favorites. We would love to send them to you. Sometimes we'll even just send a gift card. So I think it's really decreasing the waste, but still getting the products in their hands.
From an experiential perspective, we love experiential at Chobani, but it's a smaller scale. So we look at it in terms of social mentions, and sometimes if we do get the scale of attendees, we would look to see if there's lift in that market in terms of sales pre-post. The most recent one, which I'll share just because it's kind of off the wall, is we were doing a partnership with a company called Chill House. They're a nail salon in the New York area, but you can also buy their chill tips. I think they're now available at Target, so you can get them nationally. And we did a partnership with them to prioritize and highlight, drive awareness of our Chobani oat milk product. So we had custom manis inspired by the oat milk packaging. We made chill tips inspired by the packaging. And we're able to reach a different audience through that activation because we really focused on beauty in a market that over-indexes in oat milk consumption. So that was a fun one.
And for experiential, that pretty much sits at the top of the marketing funnel for us. So it's mainly an awareness play. So we're only looking at like impressions and reach. If that data is shared from the influencer, mainly could like determine what the engagement is when we're doing experiential. And just to add clarity, last year I was global influencer lead for Airbnb. So depending on the brand, that's going to determine like what the purpose of that experiential like experience is going to be. So it may be for a launch, it may be for a new product that we're putting out there. So, or it may just be like overall, like we just have extra budget left over and we just want to do an influencer dinner, So there's different ways to dice it, but experiential is really meant to really put the brand relationship at the center and also facilitating the relationships between influencers to kind of like meet each other. Those are more of the softer things that we look at versus like the hard numbers. It's like, all right, did we facilitate relationship for new influencers to meet? And are they like continuously going to be fans of the brand from this? Are they new besties? Maybe we could cast these two influencers because we saw them like hit it off at this event in another campaign. So there's a lot more to it than just like, oh, were there posts as well.
Thank you. Worked out perfect. This question is for Meredith. I know you mentioned that Dick's Sporting Goods uses a marketing agency for their partnerships. I am curious, how do you know that that experience on the influencer side went well with that agency? Do you ever reach out to them for feedback? Did you have a good experience with that marketing agency? Were you paid on time? Things like that.
That is such a great question. And to be fully transparent, I was actually just talking with Sarah as she's engaging in a partnership for Dick's Sporting Goods as well. And we don't do enough of it, though it is something that I will absolutely take back. I think in terms of payment terms, communication, unfortunately as a brand, we're juggling sometimes 20 campaigns at a time, but I think it makes sense to just pause and really engage with the influencer, even if it's just a quick focus group. Have a couple people join and get their feedback. It could be very beneficial. It's a really good call.
Hi. I have a question very similar to the first question that was asked, specifically from a nonprofit brand side of things. What advice would you all give for starting to break into working with creatives and influencers, considering nonprofit, of course, faces a lot of monetary obstacles?
Just quickly, what kind of nonprofit are you involved in?